Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns, and it is such a delight to be back with you once again. We are again sharing the future of Mr. Craig Mills and the alleged adoption scam with regard to his attempts to adopt the biological brother of a daughter, Morgan, that he has already adopted. And I think everyone is probably familiar with the basic elements of what transpired here. But Mr. Mills, today we're going to focus in on, first of all, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
But we'd like to focus in today on some of the experiences that you have had with regard to Louisiana law enforcement and the efforts that you have made in trying to get some traction with law enforcement, and give us a little feedback on what has happened there. Now folks, I'm going to let you know in this segment we're going to be kind of, you can use either phrase you'd like, getting into the weeds, so to speak. We'll be referencing several statutes, or making sausage, which is the procedure described at the Louisiana legislature for getting a bill passed. But this will largely be Mr. Mills himself demonstrating to you just what his encounters with law enforcement have been. So with that in mind, I'm going to step to the side, get behind the camera, and we're going to have the focus be towards you, Mr. Mills. So if you'd be so inclined, go ahead and start letting our viewing audience know just what kind of experiences you have had with Louisiana law enforcement.
Well, we started out with the history of Louisiana being ground zero for questionable adoptions. Then we talked about DCFS being a focal point in their responsibility or lack of follow through on their own policies. And it's funny that that we're talking about this today. This segment, when you've talked to the normal, just your everyday out on the street law enforcement officer, and you tell them we were solicited by our daughter's birth parents to keep two natural siblings, biological siblings, together, and we were supporting them under the state guidelines that allow us to do that for 2 months. Unbeknownst to us, we found out that they were shopping the baby around for about a month, and for about 5 days before the baby was born, they disappear. They do not tell us that they no longer need our support. They leave the hotel without notifying anyone. They are moved to New Orleans by the social worker who performed our home study for Morgan's adoption. And you tell that story that they just leave, they disappear. They take your money, they take your support. We didn't give them money directly, we gave the hotel and Walmart. You support them under the expectation that they set. They asked us to keep the siblings together through an open adoption. And you tell that to the everyday law enforcement officer. You see them in the barbershop, you see them at your daughter's dance recital, you see them at a restaurant, and you say, hey, can a birth mother receive support and then just all of a sudden just disappear out of the blue and not sever the relationship? And they go, oh no, you can't do that. That's theft by deceit.
Okay.
There's a revised statute for that, which the Attorney General office also said that this was theft by deceit.
Okay.
But they're too worried about the bigger picture of double dipping. I'll get into that in just a minute. But you talk to the normal person, and every single one of them, and I've talked to about 15 of them, every single one of them have said, you can't do that. That's illegal. That is a crime, and here's the crime, and you can't do that. And then they say, well, let me put you in touch with somebody. It's kind of funny, Robert. I was in the barber shop, and I was talking to one of the leaders of one of our divisions here in Baton Rouge, the state police, and I tell him the story, and he goes, you can't do that. I said, well, yeah, I know you can't do that. And he says, well, I'm going to call Major Paul Edmondson. He's the leader of the Special Victims Unit, and I'm going to tell him what your situation is. I said, sorry, sir, I've already talked to him, and he said, there's nothing going on here. There's nothing they can do. It's a civil issue.
That's what Paul Edmondson indicated to you.
That's what Paul Edmondson indicated to us in a meeting that I had with him. So you have these different instances, and in the meeting with state police, they tell me to tell the story again, and I start pointing out to them some of the things in the story, and they begin asking me questions. So the first thing they asked me is regarding extortion. Okay. So in revised statute 1466, there is actually, there's a revised statute for extortion. And he says, so tell me about what the birth mother asked for. And I said, well, the birth mother, we found out that the birth mother wanted money. So I went and talked to her. I said, look, I'm not going to pay you money. She goes, I want $500 before I sign the surrender document. And I told her, I said, I'm not paying for your baby. I have a biological son of my own, my wife and I do. And I'm not in this to buy babies. I'm not paying you. And she says, I just want to make sure I get something out of this adoption. I felt like I was being extorted.
Okay.
So Major Edmondson says, well, do you have a witness to that? And I said, sure I do. Here's her contact information. They never bothered to collaborate that with the witness.
Wow.
Okay, so we've got these. I'm going to put some revised statutes up here for your viewers so you can kind of keep track. Again, we're making the sausage here.
Okay.
Okay. 1466 is the extortion.
All right.
Okay. I'm not making the claim that that's what's happening. All I'm doing is pointing out questions, information that had been given to me from law enforcement, or questions that had been asked of me by law enforcement. So I'm not making statements of fact here. I'm pointing things, observations out.
Okay.
So the second one was, and very similar to the gentleman at the barbershop, that's theft by deceit. You can't take support from somebody. So Robert, let me read this to you. This is from the Bossier Parish Sheriff Department. Okay. There was a case in 2011 that a mother had solicited funds from, and by the way, she was using an adoption agency in Lake Charles. Okay.
Okay.
You guys can go on DCFS's website and find out which the only one of DCFS's agencies in Lake Charles. She was soliciting parents, people to adopt her child, and the Bossier the Bossier Parish Sheriff's Office actually got a conviction. Now this is the initial report, but I did get the final documentation from the district attorney in Bossier Parish, where Heather Hill was wanted, was arrested, was tried, and was convicted for her adoption scam.
Okay.
1466, 1467, and let me read this. This is not a press. This is not from the newspaper. This is actually from the Bossier Parish Sheriff's website. This is his press release. In the case that a mother decides to keep her child, she has to pay the adopting family back all the money that was provided to her for the adoption. Hill has not done so and is evading authorities.
Okay.
So, similar situation where we have a birth mother who we're supporting, again, while she's soliciting other prospective adopted families for more support, and then just leaves without severability. Okay, which is I think is required in order to discontinue some relationship. He got a conviction. Okay, so if you think about the birth mother skipping out, so we've got two so far. All right, now. One of the 12 attorneys that we've hired to handle the situation.
12 attorneys.
We've hired 12 attorneys.
Okay.
Because we want to make sure this is done right.
Sure.
This is not a game.
Right.
This is a very serious issue that is occurring more frequently in Louisiana than it should.
Yes.
Okay. We wanted to make sure it was done right.
Yes.
So we hired attorneys that are familiar with federal law, state law, RICO laws. We hired attorneys that are experts in adoption to guide us, to give us counsel.
Okay.
This this, and I don't have her permission to show you the email, but I'll read it. And I asked her about adoption fraud, and she said, yes, all parties to the fraud can be considered a part of the fraud. In some cases, even if they did nothing to prevent it or no positive actions in the fraud. Now, again, I'm not making the claim that any party did commit fraud. I'm reading to you the advice from one of our attorneys, and that's important because I'm going to get to a point where state police had referenced their own legal counsel. So that's another example of where we are. So now we're to a point where we were solicited by Ms. Harrell. If you want to keep the siblings together, you have to pay my clients back.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm already out $6,000, and I've got a daughter who we know has a biological son.
Yes.
That we were asked to keep together. You know, what do you tell them? What do you tell your daughter? And I said, okay, well, what is it that what additional do we have to? You know, we were already providing shelter for them, and now we've got to pay for someone else's shelter that they were providing at the same time. All right. A 90-day lease in New Orleans. Okay, 90-day lease. This was 4 days before the baby was born. I'm going to read to you revised statute 14286.
All right.
Selling of Minor Children's Act. Reasonable living expenses incurred by a mother for reasonable time before the birth of her child or for no more than 45 days after birth.
Would you mind turning that back around real quick? I'm going to highlight. We'll give you a link for this, but I want to just zoom right in on where he has highlighted, and you can clearly see the reference that he's making there, 45 days after the birth.
So we were asked to pay for something that was provided to the birth mother with the expectation that it would be at least 86 days postpartum.
Okay.
All right. So now we've got 14,286. Selling. Now you might ask, okay, so what happens here? Well, the first time we heard of baby selling was actually from Todd Godin's office, who was our adoption attorney. That was the first instance. I had no idea what it was. I didn't know what it meant. And then we began investigating a little bit more. What does that mean? What does it mean? Well, there's a couple of scenarios here. You saw the reasonableness. One of the other attorneys that we had have contracted with had advised us that under state law, the receipt of dual expenses, or the layman's term called double dipping, makes those receipt of expenses unreasonable, which would then violate 286. Okay. So we have the 45 days. And again, these are just things that I'm being told. I'm not making any accusations. I'm just making a point of observation. Sure. All right. So I'm just going to make a couple of ticks here. We got 45 days. We've got unreasonable expenses. Okay. We've got the double dipping aspect of it. And we became witnesses, in my opinion, we became witnesses to an alleged crime. Okay. And all of a sudden, Ms. Harrell's clients make these outlandish claims that they tried to pay us. And I'm thinking, try to pay us for what? You had nothing to do with our $6,000, in my opinion, being stolen from us. Why would you be paying us to go away?
All right, makes sense.
Okay. I made this statement to DCFS. Public bribery is the giving or offering to give, directly or indirectly, anything of apparent present or prospective value of anything of the following persons. And it says D, witness or person about to be called as a witness upon a trial or other proceeding before blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
I think that deserves some investigation if any of these things fall out. So now we've got 14-118. Okay. Sorry about that. And then there are several others, but I want to hit on one here that Ms. Harrell brought up in one of our testimonies. This is Ms. Harrell's attorney in a motion to seal and gag our case. And this is a year after we filed the lawsuit.
And by the way, that was presented. We presented that in the latest installment. We gave a direct link.
That's correct. I'm going to pull a statement out of here that I want to share with you guys.
Sure.
They are physically named, and this is Ms. Harrell's clients. Okay. They are physically named not only by name but by location in the petition, which is our lawsuit. That's a violation of 1186. It's technically, by 1186 reading, a crime. You can't do that. All right. So Ms. Harrell is testifying to her knowledge that 1186 is a crime. The strange thing about it, though, is that when I filed my complaint to the Louisiana Board of Social Work Examiners, this was 6 months before the petition she's referring to.
All right.
Ms. Harrell references her own clients' names in her response.
Okay.
Which you should be able to get from the Louisiana Board of Social Work Examiners since they are a state agency.
All right.
Okay. So you have another crime. CHC, violation of CHC 1186. She exposed her own clients' names.
Okay.
All right. I want to read a couple of things. Louisiana State Police said there's no probable cause here. So I want to read a couple of things.
Who? Let me just ask you, who within state police told you they felt there was no probable cause?
This is Lieutenant Chad Grimion.
Okay.
From the Special Victims Unit. He works underneath Paul Edmondson.
Okay.
All right. So I've got these things here. These are things that are being told to us. One of them specifically by Ms. Harrell that's a crime. The solicitation of paying for something beyond 45 days. This Bossier Parish Sheriff's Department arresting a birth mother, okay, for this. And I have a witness for the state police who they never called, that the birth mother wanted $500 before she would sign the surrender documents, which I refused to do.
Okay.
Ms. Harrell was upset to learn that the birth parents were not forthcoming with the fact that they were working with another adopting couple. That's her statement in the Louisiana Board of Social Work Examiners.
Okay.
She made certain that the birth mother had mental health counseling and was comfortable with her decision as to where she had placed where she wanted her child to be placed. That's different than what she told the Louisiana Board of Social Work Examiners.
All right.
Okay. She makes reference to the truthfulness in the ODC complaint.
Okay.
Here's the kicker. Now these are not my words, Robert. These are things that one of 12 witnesses to these events are making claims to a third party. So what did DCFS find? We talked about DCFS's investigation last time. Ms. Harrell and one of DeCloris' social workers both counseled the birth mother about the consequences she could face by purposely misleading us we were misled.
Okay.
We were the representation of the birth mother was false.
Yes.
And we found out through the phone records from the hotel that they were soliciting agencies.
Okay.
And I've got statements that the birth mother wasn't forthcoming. I have statements here. The birth mother was lying to the agencies while she was accepting support from us so that allegedly she could gain financially beyond what we were not willing to give her, i.e. an apartment,
Okay.
fully furnished in New Orleans. Okay? So these are statements that we have. And then we've got some that are in affidavits that are presented in the court, which you have access to. Ms. Simonson, who's the California facilitator, informed Ms. Harrell that Ms. Simonson was working on an adoption situation with a birth mother in Baton Rouge, who was matched with one of Ms. Simonson's out-of-state families.
Okay.
All this time while being matched with us. So if my math is correct, Robert,
All right.
we have the Millses,
Okay.
we have Ms. Harrell's client,
Okay.
and now we have noticed a third couple that the same birth mother was matched with, soliciting support. And the Attorney General's office is the one that told me that we're dealing with theft by deceit, but they're too busy to deal with that. They want the big enchilada. They want the double dipping,
All right.
if you will, which is here.
Okay.
Okay? But they want me to produce the documents. Well, Mr. Attorney General, here are your affidavits.
Okay.
And Robert, you can post that on your website.
We'll do it.
He wants me to do his job for him. I don't mind doing his job, but I'm not going to be ignored.
Okay.
I called the investigator and I said, Danny, I've got some information from Discovery. I actually have affidavits. He said to me, what am I supposed to see in those? Hell, I don't know. I have no clue at this point what you guys are looking for. I've given you documentation.
All right.
The birth mother has been forth. These are not my words.
Right.
The birth mother was not forthcoming. The birth mother was misrepresenting her intentions, which is the basis, in my opinion, of 1467.
All right.
Misrepresentation of intention, where you have precedents. Oh, this one's funny. You're gonna love this one. I happen to talk to Baton Rouge City Police, and I tell him, listen, you've got a parish sheriff department. I told him the same story. Birth mother solicited us, keep siblings together. They disappear. They bald. There's no severability. Can you do that? Well, you can't. I said, you have precedents. There's a case in Tangelo Parish as well, where the birth mother was arrested for doing the same thing.
Uh-huh.
Robert, he says to me, well, Mr. Mills, we're required to follow state law. I think these are all Louisiana state laws.
They look like Louisiana revised statutes to me.
That's correct. So, I want to read you one last thing,
Sure.
and then we'll wrap it up, and we'll kind of tie everything together in the next segment.
Sounds good.
Okay, and I'll provide this to you. This is public document as well.
All right.
So when I approached state police with the Attorney General's office saying to me, this is theft by deceit.
Okay.
Lieutenant Chad Grimion says, I'm not aware of that statute or if anyone was working that angle. So, I'll give you the email, and you can see I tried several times to meet with him, several times to give him updated information. Okay, the last email I got from him, as we discussed some time back, LSP was not going to continue any criminal investigation, and this is Lieutenant Grimion, as I felt after consulting with legal colleagues that there was not any criminal statutes that met this scenario.
Hang on, let me. And like I said, we'll provide a link for this.
And again, these are not my terms. These are not my accusations.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that we've been advised of and even asked by state police to produce a witness. And then I get an email saying there was not any criminal statutes that met this scenario.
Wow.
The problem here, Robert, is Louisiana is ground zero for adoption issues like ours. Not only because of DCFS's lack of policy enforcement, I think law enforcement's disinterest in really blaming the victim. Blaming the victim for doing something right. By keeping two siblings together. That's not a criminal issue. That's a civil issue, which is what I was told by the East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office. These are not civil issues. I'm sorry. And again, I'm not making these accusations. I'm pointing to documentation in our own legal counsel and former juvenile court judges and the CEO of Trafficking Hope. That until law enforcement takes things like this seriously, you're going to continue seeing examples like the couple out in Central who have text messages from the birth mother stating, if I don't get more money, I'm going to another family.
Wow.
Adoptions are not about money.
That was a text message sent.
I'll send you the link.
Thank you.
I'll send you the link. Adoptions are not about money. Adoptions are about providing a loving home for a child who would not otherwise have one. Ours, for example, we're going to be abandoned at the hospital and put into foster care. And then you have DCFS turning around and complaining there are 4,000 kids or however many in foster care. Well, no wonder nobody wants to adopt these kids, because they go through BS like this.
Yes.
And get told by law enforcement it's a civil issue. And I told state police, you can either address this and become interested in cases like this, or you will hear more about them. And sure enough, you have.
Yes.
Since my conversation with them. I'll send you the link.
Sounds great. I'm kind of in the man behind the camera here. I'll just briefly step back over so that people don't know that I haven't totally disappeared. But, you know, when we first started this, I said, I believe you're going to find his story fascinating. When we started this particular segment, I said we're going to be delving into getting down into the weeds. I think you'd agree that's what we've done. I think this gentleman has just shared what would be considered highly frustrating circumstances with regard to both state police, with regard to the Attorney General's office, wherein he's basically, as he has said all along, to prove elements of potential criminal activity by way of civil litigation. You dropped a little bombshell on me right there at the end about this text from a Central couple, but I'd be very interested in receiving that. I certainly do appreciate it. And I want to thank all of our dedicated viewers who have stuck with us through what is now the fourth segment. As he indicated, we're going to come back and do segment 5 and kind of tie everything all together. But I don't think anybody can sit back and objectively say that we don't have some very serious problems within the Louisiana adoption market. And I want to commend you on bringing them to the forefront, because I'm not aware of anyone who has done this kind of a public deal. I want to thank you for contacting me. I never knew this gentleman before the Sound Off feature. He saw another feature and said, hey, would you be interested in doing a segment about adoption scams in Louisiana? We met, and as I told everyone in my very first video with regard to this, he's one of the most organized people, probably the most organized person of anyone that I've met with for conveying their story. So I would think you would have to agree this has been a fascinating series. Probably this one is probably the most interesting of the 4 so far, because we've thrown out some very candid assessments of specific names within state police and about the Attorney General's office's approach to this, and that apparently they're maybe a little bit more focused on the big picture of double dipping, so to speak. But they put the.
I'm giving it to them, Robert.
I understand. So thank you all so much. Thank everyone so much for your dedication and tuning into all of our Sound Off features. We believe as we wrap up in segment 5, you are going to be thoroughly impressed at the efforts this gentleman has made. His civil litigation remains ongoing. As we indicated to you in the last video, he just got a victory in that civil litigation, and that the efforts, there's been now 2 efforts to try to get the case kicked out, his civil lawsuit against the attorney, as well as the biological parents. And there was first an exception of no cause of action. That the First Circuit didn't even agree to look at writs on that. This most recent, which took place on April 10th, was a little slightly change in wording to make it no right of action, as well as prescription. As we've indicated, Judge Hernandez denied those motions, so things will presumably be going forward in that regard. Discovery should be pretty interesting, I would think. I think it's be very interesting. They do certainly have the right to try to appeal again, well, it's their call to make, I'll just put it that way. But I'm looking forward as we progress closer and closer to what I believe is going to be a trial date on this. And as everyone knows, I spent a considerable amount of time in courtrooms. This is what I'm looking forward to. So until we meet again for segment 5, Mr. Mills, thank you so much for the kind of specificity that you've provided, and thank you for having tuned in to this fascinating series. Thank you so much.